Yep.
We're going to open up this 5:20 work session of the Plain Township Board of Trustees. The topic of discussion tonight is economic development. With that being said, I don't need to turn it over directly to you, Lisa, do I? Or?
No, you can just start.
What's that? Okay. Here he comes, and Rob was just following you around.
I'm sorry, gentlemen.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. You guys want to move? Obviously, with everything that has been going on in this township, I mean, we've got a lot of positive activity. There's still opportunity to grow and improve and build upon. There's still some vacant storefronts and so forth. I think the whole intention of this is to start the dialogue on what our framework looks like moving forward for having a consistent, uniform process for, communication engagement with the business community. So, we ensure we're keeping them happy and they're not easily enticed to leave for another community too. As well, how do we go about potentially attracting additional business to fill? I think there's a couple of things that, at least in my mind, and this is just thinking out loud, not that I've got anything specific, but I think, is this something ultimately from a position, are we looking to add it to somebody that's already on staff? Is this a new body? Is it part-time? Is it full-time? As far as, hours, but then what does, business retention, what's the business retention piece of it? Whether it's Queen Campbell Williams up in the high rent district to, down at Market 30th Street, where you've got times where Lady Super Fitness is gone, so there's a big, space there. So then it's the business attraction, business retention, and I think we know what some of our value is. I mean, talking through what's the messaging when we're out, and I'm not saying that just as whoever the primary responsibility falls on, making sure we're all walking and talking the same message, because that's important for consistency. So that was sort of the mindset I'm coming from, and some different thoughts on that.
No, I'm glad I mentioned it 2 months ago, and now I'm glad you brought this to the table. For me personally, as one trustee, I would like to see, like, I'll use for an example, like there's a lot of attorneys. And each attorney has their own expertise. That's what they've done. In this particular case, we could find a person who that is what they've done all their life. This is their expertise. This is what their bread and butter is. Now, you had mentioned 10 hours, 20 hours, I don't know. I'm just saying that.
Because the reality is, I mean, and not just looking at Plain, but looking around, I mean, look at North Canton. North Canton probably does have an equal or maybe a slightly greater business base just upon where they're positioned. And when Eric Bowles retired over there, the city over there did not fill that position. They went the route of a contract with the Chamber of Commerce, where they spend X dollars a month and they get X hours out of that. And that's based upon the discussion I had with Doug Lane. So, that pulls in a whole other facet of what types of entities and organizations do we need to make sure we've got a regular foothold in. Is it Plain Township, being a chamber member, of one or more of the surrounding areas? I don't think we can draw the same parallel with Jackson Township when they had their own, just because of that base they had over there. But I really feel it's almost more of a chamber function to promote the businesses than it is necessarily, say, a city council or a board of trustees. And I think if history serves me right, you were part of the board where you guys at least explored and tried it, and you probably got some good lessons learned that we can engage in. John, you probably would have been here for that as the chief, so.
And I don't remember a whole lot about it, because, you know, it was one of those things that, you know, I thought was a good idea, but, yeah, what, do you recall much of that? I just recall, I don't think there was a
It
lot
didn't
of.
go anywhere.
No.
The person, but it just didn't.
Wasn't that where Elise Fonseller was here?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, she did that before me, she did economic
She
development.
did, yeah.
I think we approached it differently than what we're talking about. It was tied in somewhat to planning and zoning and that kind of thing. I think what I hear you guys talking about is kind of a dedicated economic development person / business in Plain Township liaison
That's
type.
probably well said.
Almost a marketing person perspective, and we've not done that before, because that's not what we
We've
use
not done that
Mary
before,
Lee
no.
for, or
No,
Karen
that is
for.
correct, no.
So this is kind of a new territory, I think.
That's a good point, Eric, because when it comes down to the work of creating a CRA
Right.
or enterprise zone, you and I do that. We can
Right.
do, you know, that aspect of it. But if you had somebody so many hours a week doing just what Eric said, marketing the township.
You know what we could do, if it's not working, then this person's not working, because what are we looking at? We're looking at Whipple and Fulton Road, are our two biggest.
Yeah, the
feeders.
board's done a tremendous job. Look
Yeah.
at all the economic development
We've done-
going on.
We've got some things happen, but that street there on Whipple and Fulton are the two that are our main concern, that just.
Because it ever hurts pretty well for the stint that it is. It's, but, you know, we have, you know, that little bit of 30th Street. But then you do have an industrial area down here with
Right.
Hezrock, and, you know,
Right.
actually, Tom, Lisa, Tom and myself met with Chris Johnson, even just from the Stark Development Board, who we've had conversations with in the past when they've come to us with some, you know, propose, you know, we gotta be able to still be aware of that, and how can we leverage that to, you know, from that very discussion with Chris Johnson, who's primarily focused on industrial commercial, not retail, you know, we get to talking about a tract of property that's coming up for sale up on the Mount Pleasant area,
Yeah.
which could, you know, present good opportunity for
And he wasn't
business
aware of
basically in
that.
proximity. However, it could also very quickly become one of those residential areas too. So it's somebody that's, you know, keeping their pulse on that, whether it's regular communications. I mean, God, I've got a list of the developers even right around the area here where we can, you know, talk, whether it's a D-Hoff, a Lemon, a Fitzpatrick, you know, Putnam. You know, there's really no developers council around here, because even after our meeting, I made a couple calls and nobody really was wearing. But, you know, I think we may be able to, whether it's a chamber or chambers, the BIA, you know, the BIA just from pure construction, even though you're gonna have, it's probably heavier residential, but I know from having went to some of those, there's still commercial. I think we need to, I'm not gonna solve all the problems here tonight, but what do we want to see as our next step in trying to establish some goals and just the initial framework? Is it the expectations of the role, which would be a description and the top hours? Because honestly, I think that type of assessment, it's going to be a little difficult to gauge, but we can probably get some guidance from some folks through the neighboring chambers. I mean, I know North Canton's still chomping at the bit because they haven't folded into the greater Canton Regional Chamber of Commerce. They may be somebody who would say, hey, for, you know, the $3,000 a month that the city of North Canton pays us, we're giving them X hours, and that realistically allows us to do these functions during this time. I don't think Plain Township signing up to do a contract with, say, the city of North Canton is anything I'm remotely touching on, because I think there's too many potential conflicting interest there. But, you know, whether it's been reaching out through, oh God, it's over at Kent State, the small business. Score. Yeah, reaching out through Score, they really don't have folks that could come in and do this. They have trained professionals, you know, you may have legal and Eric, you may have CPA. They have individual expertise to where if you want to come in and get your own business going and that,
Yeah.
they can give advice from that, but from an actual business, you know,
Promotional type of thing.
promotion, retention, acquisition. And I think the one thing that's safe to say, at least I felt like taking away from just our meeting with Chris, is it doesn't matter if it's the city of Canton, North Canton, Alliance, Maslin. Some of these big box stores, when they're coming in, it's not that these other municipalities and villages have been out there pounding the corporate lines. It's the fact that those corporations have already done their homework, and they're coming in, the number that was used was 90%. 90% of that activity is that they're coming to the entities. It's not that the entities have found them, but then, once they are coming in, how do they, you know, pull that together? It's no different than whether it was working with the Giltzes back here through the commissioners, you know, CRA, tax abatement, and so forth. So I guess, you know, starting out, since I'm all over the board here with my comments so far, and just thoughts and getting them out, is it, you know, realistically, you know, job description and hours expectation.
I think the two
Is, we need to, I think we need to explore that, and how we do that is, I would say, have a conversation with at least Doug Lincoln. Maybe you can, you know, say Denny Saunders, he's a township or Plain Township resident who, you know, has Canton, but then we, probably Ray Hexenberg was the one from the Stark Development Board.
I think he was gonna go back and talk to him
Yeah.
for that kind of idea on, you know, if
For
it was a
additional-
person. Yeah.
It's a start.
Yeah.
And again, if this person comes to us and we find out within a couple of months, we don't see anything happening, he's talked to all the business owners come back, don't know what they're doing yet, I mean, where else could you take this person then? But right now, we have some area that needs help, and maybe this person with their expertise and one that knows how to talk to these people to bring something into those plans.
And I think it's important, because you're referencing time, I definitely think we need to set some type of pre-identified timetable, because anything less than 6 months,
Yeah.
I mean, by the time you just even get in an intro, anybody that's coming in off the streets trying to sell right off, I can tell you, I'm like,
Yeah, right.
But I think I've heard you talk about the second piece of this too. So you have the promotional, retention, attraction, marketing piece. But I think you also have a piece that we've talked about for a long time, but we haven't been able to put together. And the second piece of that is simply identifying what we have. What do we have to offer?
That's just
And
it.
just saying, okay, look,
That's
it's
just-
one thing to say we want to attract,
What do we have to
but
offer?
what do we have to offer? Where are these tracks that would be manufacturing appropriate, retail appropriate?
Tom created that list.
Great.
Yep, he gave it to the Stark Development Board, and he had the maps, he had what they were zoned.
Okay.
So that's in place.
So that's huge. I mean, just to have that for this person to work from, because I
Yeah.
think that's part number 2 of the kind of things you've been talking about.
Scott, I thought, were you gonna get a call from Ray Hexamer, or were you gonna get a call back from the gentleman we met with about?
Chris, I thought he was gonna follow. He was supposed to follow up
Yeah,
with him, so I haven't.
Okay.
We met, what was it, Thursday?
oh, yeah, it seems
Third.
like forever ago, but it was just
Yeah,
last
it was
Thursday.
Last Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
This may be, too far to the right of the conversation, but we had talked about trying to do a video to put on the website, like saying, well, you know, here's plain, whether you're picking it for a home or for business, you know, some kind of a, I don't know if that would help with that marketing tool, like, you know, just saying, you know, welcome to Plain Township, we have full-time police department, we have, you know, fire, we have roads, we have, so if a business was looking for the area, that they have some infrastructure to support it, you know, they're not,
And honestly, I think even outside of that position, that's something we should have out there just as a means of naturally marketing ourselves as a whole. But, so even if the board was slow based on, you know, getting that route, you know, or that position moving forward, I still think that's.
Yeah. And it should be professional, not, you know, us trying to do it, and I actually know a gentleman who does that. He has a production company locally.
See, Scott, I'll give you an example, and I think I told you, John, that there's this gentleman who owns a property right next door. This person we have now, if we had somebody,
Yeah,
here's the
but you
person
want
we
it
can
to
send
be
to
a
talk.
little different than
He wants
just
to come
that.
and share
There's
some
a
ideas.
gentleman, Henry.
You know, I'm okay going there and talking to him, but then this person with the expertise would be the better person than me. Because I don't, this isn't my expertise. Yeah, I'll sit and listen to him, I'm only one, I have to bring back the information.
and I know the gentleman across the street from me, he does that stuff too, you know, production stuff.
So,
Well, we'll give them a call and,
Interesting.
you know, see, maybe I'll bring, his first name's Henry, I can't remember his last name off the top of my head, just to tell him maybe what we're looking at there promotional video-wise, get some thoughts, ideas.
I think it'd be good if we had, I don't know, a badge, an identifier, Plain Township, a place to call home. Something to identify Plain Township.
Like Jackson is, what is it?
We make things
Things
happen.
happen.
what's ours say?
Service.
Oh, yeah.
Service, yeah.
I'm not sure if that's really a tagline, and, you know, highlights those, yeah, characteristics. It would be good to have something like that.
So, I mean, outside of talking to Ray, actually about potential profit council thing, they may be able to shed some insight on what type of skill sets.
They may even have a sample job description or
Sure.
something where they could get access to pretty quickly.
Bottom line, it's someone's expertise, this is what they've done all their life. Someone who either could be almost semi-retired and wants to do something extra, or just someone who's looking for something.
Yeah.
You know, and ultimately, you know, we talked about this. It's great if you, hey, we know somebody who can do it, here's what the job entails. It all sounds good, how's it funded?
Right, how's
That's,
that?
I mean,
True.
we can paint the perfect picture,
Did you
but
see Tom shaking his
if we don't,
head?
if we don't have the funding mechanism,
Yeah.
all this
Yeah,
doesn't
you're right.
mean.
It doesn't mean you're right.
Mm-mm.
We gotta pay them too.
Yeah, because I don't think they turn in college
Yeah,
students
can't
with
do
a.
that, no.
To do
Commissioners, it's something.
Community service?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was doing some research on my own a few months ago, like starting up like a community development corporation and kind of researching how those operate. And seems like one of the good things for business retention is like an annual visit to businesses, see how things are going, see what we could do to make their life easier, to make them want to expand. So I kind of drafted a little questionnaire, just has 5 questions that, you know, the person might be able to use or look at. And the other thing for business attraction, I was researching, it said it's always easy to start where there's already momentum. So if there's like an area in the township where there's already businesses coming in, or it's a hot area, kind of focus on that to bring more in and kind of grow it out from there. And I thought maybe like a quick reference zoning handout or something you could just give a business owner a perspective that kind of was just an overview of different, you know, zoning regulations that might pertain for signs or, you know, business buildings, that sort of thing. And then maybe like a unified community events calendar we could keep where if a business is having a parking lot party or an anniversary event, we could kind of promote it for them to help drive residents there.
I like that.
Can we use a would it be appropriate to use a newsletter and a follow-up? For example, we have existing businesses, and one of those businesses decides to sink 20 grand in an upgrade of their property, and when we go back and look at it, you know, they say, yeah, look what we just did here, you know.
Absolutely.
It would, you know, it might be something that, if for nothing else, we could put in the newsletter and
Yeah.
say, you know, we visited this business and, you know, they've improved their facilities based on this, and this. Give them a little recognition. You know, I think that would be good for retention standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something we could do right away.
Obviously, if you look at something, and this is, that was my, you know, what's just been done, do-it-yourself car wash down here by Sunshine Medical. We all know what that's looked like the last couple of years. Those guys come in and laid fresh asphalt, laid fresh asphalt for whole 9 yards. I mean, that's like, well,
A long conversation with them. Yep, about that very issue. So.
Well, maybe he's the first spotlight.
That's what prompted me to think about that. What could we possibly do for somebody like that? But you're right. And, you know, we didn't really mention that in all of the economic development. We kind of used the big hitters.
Yeah.
And here's a little guy, but the little guy obviously is thinking along those same lines.
Yeah,
So-
and it'd be good because we just did a piece on economic development to reference that
Sure.
piece and say it was focused on, you know, the big stores, you know, the big businesses. This piece is going to focus on,
Sure.
you know.
Because, I mean, when you take into
New business.
consideration, yeah, we have, you know, the automotive repair that we changed the
Yeah.
zoning for.
Yeah.
to take a look whether it's even pawpaw.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. That's that big.
That's
for
true.
20
Yes.
bucks and it's
Exactly.
That's true. Yeah.
That would be a good main piece for the next newsletter.
Yeah.
And then ask those businesses that have done similar things to
Mhm.
contact us if they want to be, you know, in the newsletter.
We could ask for comments from them. Where's Plain Township?
Oh, yeah,
Done for
yeah.
you.
Like a mini interview with them or,
Mhm.
And then we can
That's
ask
true.
their
Yeah.
comments.
yeah,
There you go.
yeah. Why'd you choose Plain Township?
Just don't have enough tools, right, except for income tax, other than that, and the tips.
I mean, through the county, I mean, no different than Jackson. I mean, whether it's tax abatements, CRAs to,
Got some.
God, what's the other?
Enterprise zone.
Yeah, enterprise zone, CRA.
Yeah, and that person doesn't have to focus on that, you know, once somebody says, I'm interested in a CRA, that's where we can take over because we put those together.
And that's where we've got, we have to be using stuff with all the board.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So forth. So. This is such an encompassing animal in and of itself, I guess. I mean, to have a more formal public conversation, this is a good start,
Yeah.
but I want to walk away from what are our key actionable items and who's owning them moving forward. Obviously, I'll have the follow-up conversation with Chris Johnson in regards to, you know, whether it's talking with Ray, see what we can get as far as skills, characteristics, and people, but then,
I'll look into the production video of the township, and I think between the, like Tom, myself, we can follow up with the businesses for the next newsletter.
I think the public list of available properties, I know you've piled that, but is there a way that we can get that published?
Put it on the website.
On the web.
Yeah, we
Online,
can
you
put it
know,
on our
plain
website.
simple, you know, and if it's one of those, hey, you want more details, contact us at, and then, you know, not that you're gonna go show, you may go show them where the location is, but as far as any type of real estate, activity, I do think that's where we need to be establishing or building upon what relationships we do have with folks, you
Well,
know.
we
whether
already
it's-
are establishing with realtors,
Yeah,
and we could just bring them to the realtor.
because I mean, I think the realtors are one piece of it, that's where somebody, I think the developer side of it too is very important, because I mean, close, but there's still a different function, you know. Say on the residential side, I mean, we've got Lyman and the over at Edgewood. They're well in on the front of that before even a realtor's even thinking about it or knowing it. By the time the realtor then knows about it, that's something that's already realistically
already in
happening with
play.
it, within the township. So I think, you know, whether it's the DeVilles, the DeHoffs, the Fitzpatricks, the Springs, you know, putting in Tom Jackson, those are just some of the ones thinking, you know, is it a quarterly, just touch point, and I think the intro is nothing more than, hey, you know, we probably have been more passive in the past, some stuff has fallen. Some of it we have actively engaged in,
Yeah.
found, so it's a combination
Yes,
of
we
two,
have.
but, you know, that quarterly touch point of, hey, we're just simply wanting to see what new indicators you're seeing, because I mean, the analysis and information those guys get, that they're paying for, if they can help share some of that with us, I mean, that makes us more educated and informed, and we're engaging folks in the, funding's still a ways off, obviously, so we can see what the framework is, so then we can figure out what the cost would be, so then we know what we need to work to fund. What do we want, I mean, realistically, what would we want to set as far as for a next type of conversation, just so we keep dialogue? I mean, I don't want to have meetings and conversations just for, hey, we're sitting here and we're talking about nothing's getting done. I want stuff that's, I'm sure we all do, specific, measurable, actionable.
About the second meeting in January, because I know.
With all the holidays and so
Yeah,
forth.
and people are on vacation, so I think that's more realistic. The first meeting, I didn't recommend just because it was all the beginning of the year resolutions. But Tom and I's deadline will be the next newsletter for highlighting the smaller businesses. So that may already be done, of course, you know, with you all looking at it, and but that's probably more realistic. Unless somehow it all comes together, and you can always request.
So we said the second meeting in January.
It should be the 23rd.
And essentially, we'll be reporting out to each other between now and then,
Yeah.
and see how we can refine that,
Yeah.
pull something more structured and formal. I think that'll talk to what we would anticipate being the major discussion points. You know, and obviously, hey, and if somebody went so far as to claim that we had, I mean, the joys of the election cycle, claim that we had a contract with the city of Canton for economic development. I know that was thrown out there, but I know that was quickly dispelled as far as what was, it was following our editorial board interview, saying, hey, we understand you guys have an agreement with the city, and that's, I said, we work within the existing CETA areas where properties come in and so forth, but that's not a.
Yes, it's not ongoing, it's
Service
yeah.
provider contract, so.
And Tom, do you mind, like, you brought up some really good points, kind of putting those together for
Sure,
everybody?
yeah, absolutely.
That would be great.
Lisa, I know you guys, email or conversation, but even over in Jackson. Okay, they haven't historically had a person fill that, their board. I mean, I've got a relationship on.
That would be great if you,
Call it, I mean, did they give any guidance based upon what you've heard on how exactly they handle?
how Todd and Randy handle, because it seems like it's a trustee and the fiscal officer that do it, right? Wouldn't you agree with that?
Me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jackson.
seems to be pretty-
Yeah. He's,
So maybe follow up with them, if you wouldn't mind
Yeah,
seeing at least how they're doing it, because
and if you want to Todd, that would be great.
I don't do so. I'll do that as well.
Okay.
Anything else as far as discussion for this?
I think that's it.
No, I think this was really beneficial, kind of gave us some clear paths to follow and.
Giving us a foundation.
Very good.
All right, well then we'll close out our work session at 5:52. We'll reconvene for our normal meeting at 6 o'clock. Subway. That had to be nightmare.
But actually, listen, don't get me in trouble. I can bring up more of this. I know you could, I know you could. That's my problem. Oh, okay. Didn't know that. Awesome,
Thank you. I just decided I wanted to kind of get it.
I missed the where you're getting. Okay, so this is just a discussion about economic options in general, or?
Discussion about,
Right.
potentially funding
Yeah. township, but, you know.
Well, I was on Fraser. You're already by the county. I said, yeah. And, well, you kind of come to look at there. Me, it's just hard to he went up there. We were there.
Hi.
Thanks for helping out.
Oh, no problem, we're stressed right now. My child, we're trying to figure out what to do with my child, our child. Teenager that just, we're sitting here like, should we go? Oh, so you get all the dirt, right?
Oh, yeah. 121-year-old Rob. Free.
Oh, I was saying, you were probably a like my 14-year-old being like.
Oh, Lord. Well, one thing that hasn't changed is I'm still opinionated, so you can't blame that one on me.
Yeah.
That's natural.
See, unfortunately, my child is kind of following my footsteps. He's just as opinionated as me and stubborn.
I can relate. I don't have children, but I was that child. So.
Well, now we have the wrestling coach trying to tell him, cut a whole bunch of weight, and I'm just like, why? You're at this weight class, why cut? I just got that news right before he came in, so I'm like, he has nothing to lose weight on.
He told me that I lied.
Hey, Rob, who all the players are.
Make sure you know.
Yeah.
I told one out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'll check first thing in the morning.
No, that was all, yeah, I appreciate it. Well, thank you. And congratulations both of you.
Thank you.
Good.
All right,
Good, how about you?
good.
So what you
Troublemaker in the back there.
Well, that's actually.
What are you doing quietly and then?
Try to get a little more out of it. No, it's working.
I remember too, like.
No, that's good. I appreciate it.
May call to order this meeting of the Plain Township Board of Trustees. If everybody will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before us, we have our agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections by fellow board members or department heads at this time? Okay, the agenda will stand as presented. Do want to reference, we will have a 6:15 PM public hearing regarding a text change, so wherever we're at in the meeting, I'll be interjecting, so we can go immediately to that public hearing for timely purposes. The sheriff's report, we don't have, or do we have something, Captain?
If it pleases the board, Captain Runsberg on behalf of Sheriff Meyer, we don't have a monthly report from the state time. However, I do have 2 quick updates. I believe all the trustees were present and went over and met with Avondale's HOA, and one of the graphs we had shown was actually this graph here. And what it was a representation of how many traffic stops had occurred in the calendar year 2016. And it was slightly over 100, probably around 108 or so. And I was able to explain at that point in time to the Avondale HOA that during 2017, we'd almost topped that, we almost met that, so we were 100. One of the takeaways from the meeting with the association over there was that there was a traffic problem. So the Stark County Sheriff's Office, combined with Plain Township activities, ran an extra traffic enforcement list from September 26th through October 29th. During that time, we stopped 122 cars. 68 citations were issued, one of those being an OVI. As far as cost back to the township did agree to pay or reimburse for 2 hours of overtime, and we used a total of 15 hours of overtime through state grants or state funding. So there's no cost for additional 15 hours for that extra traffic enforcement. So I just kind of want to get it out there that we are listening to what the public's asking us for, and that we did take action on that. And we understand that always, whenever you do a heavy traffic enforcement area, that the people traveling the motorists in the area are probably going to start going back to their old habits once or way. So we're going to have continued ongoing controls over there as well. The other thing I want to make an announcement about is that Sheriff Meyer is hosting a Coffee with a Cop event, and that's going to be on the 28th. So it's November 28th from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. That's going to be over on the west side of the township at Samantha's Sunny Corner on Hills and Dales. So November 28th, any members of the public between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. are invited to stop by if they have any concerns, questions, or comments. There'll be a couple of us standing over there just to kind of meet and greet and discuss the situation in the township. If you guys don't have any questions for me, that'll be.
Is there anybody in the audience that has any questions or anything for the sheriff? Okay. For the sheriff's report, it takes us to unfinished business. I'll turn it over to Ms. Campbell.
Thank you. Item number 1 under unfinished business was some follow-up about the garbage truck complaint. I made some additional calls to Republic Waste with the same response and promises to have somebody higher up get back to me, and that did not happen. I was told there's no local office, there was nobody above the person that I could talk to, and that I'd get calls back within 24 to 48 hours. Made several of those calls with no response. I did explain to the lady on the phone that, you know, all we're asking is for one route change. Not amenable to it on their end, and told them on the opposite end what could happen is you could be told by the Board of Trustees when your entire business can operate, and I would think that would be a detriment to your business. Does that concern you at all? Nope, that's how we change routes, it's only that way. If we take complaints from one person, we have to take them from other people. And I said, however, this is the only complaint. Have you been inundated with calls? No. I said, well, this is the one, you know, we're asking if you could please change that route. To no avail.
Well, I think part of the challenge here is too, from looking into this, we also have concerns. I mean, this just isn't about noise. If you go to restricting their hours, if you restrict those hours, when you take a look at the time of the year, how through the health department, noting concerns with odors just because of, you know, the times of the year where the heat, and, you know, that stuff's going to be out during the prime hours, you know, versus say early in the morning where it may be darker, cooler. I mean, that was some additional feedback. So to me, this isn't strictly an issue of, yeah, the primary complaint may be noise. However, there are a number of factors that we have to weigh as well on whether or not we will want to broach the subject of a limitation on their hours.
And it wouldn't just be a limitation on Republic, it would be
Right,
Across all.
any
Any
hauling
vendor.
company,
Any
any
vendor.
vendor. Mhm.
I guess, I mean, in the situation we're dealing with, I mean, I know the HOA, they have every right within their means as well to be able to negotiate a single provider for within there. I think honestly that needs to be the first means, from my opinion, before the township looks at trying to do anything countywide, because in talking with folks over in North Canton, when Dave negotiated, there's a lot of complexity to negotiating that transition, you know, to service provider, if we were to even go that far. And you still have folks that are upset, listen, I didn't want this, I want to be able to use these people. So I think for the sake of the quantification of volume here, plus the means, you know, available, I think we have to put it back in the situation for the HOA to negotiate that. That's my take. I mean, what do you, I mean,
I would still like-
I don't know how much more there is really to discuss.
I know we got kind of thumbed at by the vendor, but I still think we need to pursue that route. And I mean, I guess, you know, can we do a letter, to get that letter in somebody's hands farther up, and explaining to them what our situation is, what us changing our home rule can do, not only for them in their business throughout the rest of the township, but other vendors as well. And maybe somebody will pay attention to that. Because obviously, whatever we do, it's going to affect every vendor and everywhere throughout the township. And right now, it appears like we have one problem area. And I would think that the vendor themselves would be more than willing to at least target that one area to change their schedule versus needing to go in and change their entire township-wide schedule. Because if we create a 6 o'clock time, for example, they won't be able to go anywhere before 6 o'clock. None of them will.
Is there any type of council or anything where we're able to identify, you know, who's their statutory
They don't
agent?
even have a
anything?
local office, so.
That's where,
That,
I'm just thinking from, you know, kind of business, when we have legal stuff that's sent, I mean, the corporation typically has a statutory
I'm sure they do.
agent
Yeah.
that those legal communications go to. I mean, is that something we'd be able to find?
Yeah, you can find it online, it's easy to find who that person is or who that entity is. If you want, we could send them a letter and include a sample of the legislation we already have ready to go and say the things that Trustee Sabo's outlined. We don't want to go this route, but if we have to, we will.
And all we're asking for is a simple schedule change
Sure.
in the targeted area,
Yeah.
not the entire township.
Honestly, as well, I mean, where I take this, I mean, it's like an entire, you know, group of kids. You got one black sheep. Why does the rest of them have to pay the price for one's?
Yeah.
So why don't, I mean, for the sake of the next step, identify the statutory agent, send them a communication with the draft of the potential legislation.
I just think we need to-
Identify a timetable in which we need to have a response back by.
We just need to be careful. We're talking about basically changing, the home rule is basically changing a law, a rule.
Sure.
Every morning at 5:10 on Monday, I'm woken up with garbage trucks. I'm woken up, pretty loud banging noise. So for me personally, is it enough for us to create a home rule that represents, we represent 40,000 people in this township? We have to be careful. We create a home rule for this, then you get Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones, I'm just using those names, those aren't really people that I know, but they come in, well, they have a problem, we made a home rule for this, we'd like to have a home rule for
Sure.
that. So I just think we need to be careful, and I'm repeating myself, but if this was an overwhelming bunch of residents petitioned here, standing room only, then we've got a problem. And if it's coming from different allotments, then we have a problem. We have to be careful. We're changing a rule, a law, which affects a lot of people.
I agree.
Yeah, they want, instead of waiting until the end.
All right. Is there any, are you the individual that come?
Yeah,
If you'll state your name and address for the record for the fiscal officer.
do you want me to stand up there? or-
We can hear you from the
Okay.
speaker.
Whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay. My name is David Friedman. I live at 6919 Deer Trail Avenue Northeast, which is in Wellington Hills. My house is located adjacent to the intersection with Fallen Timber. And, you know, I've talked to Gary Ball about the noise of the Republic truck coming. He comes down Deer Trail. He probably comes by my house like between 4:20 and 4:30 in the morning. The truck continues down the street to Eagle Nest. There's a few houses I think they serve down there. He turns around, the truck comes back up Deer Trail. There's two houses across the street from me. He stops at two houses with the noise of, you know, lifting up the trash can and all that stuff. Then the truck continues to Fallen Timber. He makes a right turn on Fallen Timber, and he starts traveling down Fallen Timber, and then he disappears probably back in those neighborhoods. And then about 20 minutes later, which is about 4:50, the truck comes back up Fallen Timber, and he's back at the intersection across the street from my house. And then he makes a right turn back on Deer Trail and goes up Deer Trail. And, you know, obviously I don't know where he goes from there. But so that's between 4:20 and 4:50 in the morning every Thursday morning. You know, I have that truck running back and forth in front of my house. And I originally, when I moved into that house, I did have the Republic service. I think originally they had told you to put out your trash can by 6, but then somewhere along the line that changed, and like I called up Republic to ask them what time the trash can is supposed to be put out, and they said, we recommend you put it out the night before. So I think it's been like over a year's time frame where they started coming in this real early hour. And so I changed my service to Kimball back in July. And my neighbor that lives to the right of me, he also changed his service to Kimball in the October time frame. So that got rid of 2 houses that the truck didn't have to stop at, but there's still 2 houses across the street from me that he stops at and goes down Eagle's Nest and down Fallen Timber. So either, you know, it'd be nice if my neighbors across the street would change their service to Kimball, and everybody else would change their service to Kimball, and we could get rid of the Republic truck.
Have you talked to your HOA at all about going to a single?
Yeah, Gary Mall had put out some emails earlier, like in the summer, because people were complaining through email to Gary about the truck coming through, you know, Deer Trail and that area. And I think Gary said he was maybe going to take an initiative to see if they can, you know, just do like one contract with Kimball for the whole, you know, HOA. I don't think, I haven't talked to Gary recently about it, but he hasn't mentioned that he's made any progress or done anything with that. So I really can't say where that stands or what they're thinking about that.
Could we put that in our letter as another possible?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's include that possibility as well.
You guys were gonna have to.
I think we just have to get their attention in some way.
I think Monticello is contracted just to Kimball.
Kimball's cheaper.
You guys were gonna have to. We'll come back to you.
Okay.
It's just that I've got a 6:15 hard start for this public hearing on text changes. So I appreciate your comments to this point. We are going to temporarily adjourn from our regular meeting at this point to go to the 6:15 zoning hearing for a text change. And I'm going to turn this matter over to our zoning director, Mr. Farrar.
Thank you, Mr. President. You have before you the recommendation of the Township Zoning Commission, which voted 4-1 to deny the addition of the definitions of hedge, shrub, tree, and wall into Article 4 of the zoning resolution. There has been a recommendation by our legal counsel that the definition of a tree be removed from this proposed text change. The reasoning for that is by defining what a tree, by defining what a shrub and a hedge are, we have defined what a tree is not. So based on that reasoning, there would no longer be a need for the definition of the tree.
Well, just to be clear, that wasn't from legal counsel.
Outside.
That was IPC, right?
Outside.
Yeah.
Oh, is advocating we get rid of the definition of a tree?
Yes.
Okay, I must have missed it.
But that's not it. We're not saying air. We're talking,
No.
let's be very clear.
Yes.
Outside.
You're saying
council.
No, I know, I just thought that we had a definition we wanted to include in, maybe I missed it. I'll let Jim speak to that.
Actually, and actually, maybe we'll probably preface that before we go to anybody that's here to talk in support of or in opposition to. Jim, do you care to just take a minute and introduce yourself and then state the logic behind the
That'd be great, thank you.
recommendation?
Good evening. For those of you who don't know, I'm Jim Matthews, and I have an associate from our office with me, Andrea Zarco, who you may know. It's my privilege from time to time to augment the services of your law director in the representation of the township on various cases. And I've recently, or most recently, had the privilege to represent some of you in connection with some issues that arose under the hedge, wall, and bush, or whatever it is, fence provision of your zoning resolution. And you all know what the lawsuit or lawsuits have been about. For purposes of a little bit of the record, I'll go back and just briefly describe what you dealt with. The initial case was a mandamus case seeking an order from the Court of Appeals compelling the township to enforce the hedge provision in a context where the township reasonably articulated that the condition involved trees rather than a hedge. Fortunately, the Court of Appeals dismissed the case. There was then an effort on the claimant's side to pursue an appeal to the Ohio Supreme Court. When there was no brief filed, however, by the claimant, that case was dismissed, and that brought that matter to an end. There was then a second lawsuit filed alleging pretty serious allegations of fraud and other misrepresentation and what have you against one of your township trustees and your zoning administrator. We quickly filed a motion to dismiss that case. That case was also dismissed by the Common Pleas Court. It is, however, on appeal to the Court of Appeals. So there is an open issue to deal with at the appellate level. The thought I had in introducing or proposing this to you was to try and dispense with any claim by anyone that there is some type of ambiguity or uncertainty in your zoning resolution relating to the enforcement of your hedge provision. As you know from your work with your zoning resolution, it's rather typical in form. It has a series of definitions that you've adopted, which are meant to kind of make the enforcement of your zoning resolution simpler. Any particular use of these words that are defined, found throughout the zoning resolution, are meant to have these definitions applied. So my thought was, while we could stress in a proposed zoning text change the fact that we all believe that the words wall and hedge, for instance, are clearly understood and have an ordinary and customary plain meaning to be applied to them, nevertheless it would make sense for purposes of the zoning resolution to have clear definitions of what a wall and hedge would consist of. that was the reason for gathering a series of definitions drawn. I didn't reinvent the wheel since we're dealing with walls, hedges, and such. So I looked at a series of other zoning resolutions throughout the state to try and see how others have dealt with the terms that are involved here. That's what led to the creation of the proposal that was submitted to you. To jump ahead, we know the state of the record. We know that the matter was reviewed by regional planning. Regional planning, for whatever reason, thought that the definition of tree, providing what I thought was some measure of certainty to defining a tree, was like too difficult to enforce, and they thought the better approach would be to just say something of substantial heights that's woody. I think that would be counterintuitive to our exercise of trying to add clarity to your zoning resolution. So my thought was, having reviewed that recommendation and also having reviewed the video from your zoning commission's meeting, the big hang-up seems to be over the definition of tree. And that you could, as an option, simply remove tree from this proposal altogether and just look at the definitions of hedge and shrub to accomplish what we want to accomplish. What I did too is I went back through your code and I pulled all of the references or instances where the word tree shows up in your resolution. It does appear a number of times. However, it's usually in a rather innocuous situation where, for instance, a plan may be required to show plantings, trees, shrubs, and that type of thing. That's typically where the word tree shows up. So it may not be necessary to have that more clearly defined in your resolution. I also went back through the resolution and pulled the instances where shrub is present. And setting aside for a moment the hedge clause, shrub appears basically in the same context. Whenever the planning requirement refers to having something shown on a plan relating to a mix of trees and shrubs and such, that's typically where you have the word shrub. So I'm not sure that in that context you would wind up in many situations of someone claiming there's an ambiguity. But the one clause that does present the issue is when you're dealing with 602.10, fences, walls, and hedges. Your resolution already has a well-written definition of fence, doesn't need to be rewritten or recrafted. Does not have a definition for wall. I proposed one as part of this proposal as well, that I think you should consider. But then dealing with hedge, having a simple, easily understood, and easily applied definition of hedge, I think would solve these predicaments that have come up that have led to these two lawsuits. The definition of hedge is also drawn from a number of sources, some various materials, City of Dublin, a couple other city materials that deal with their planning codes and trying to define what a hedge is. I also looked at some arborist materials for standard definitions of what a hedge is and put them together in a simple one-sentence definition for you. I don't think there's anything confusing about it. I think it's pretty straightforward. And the important feature to having this definition would be that it speaks directly to a row or line of closely spaced shrubs. I know that this may sound kind of goofy. It gets into the proverbial weeds, no pun intended. But when we're looking at the situation that was thrown upon you, it just makes sense to get rid of this as ever being an issue again. I believe wholeheartedly your zoning official made the correct call that pine trees that are 20 or 25 feet tall, regardless of their placement, regardless of them being in a tree line or what have you, is not what an ordinary common person would think is a hedge. But it's interesting to reflect upon the zoning commission's comments throughout their meeting. They suggested that these are just all common things, and it's all common language, and just plain wording, and we all apply it. That literally begs the question. That is the predicament we're struggling with. It won't come as any surprise to you that there are countless dictionaries out there anymore. There's no longer like the standard dictionary that everybody turns to for a definition of things. I just spent some time pulling a few examples of dictionary definitions of hedges, and they're all over the place. Some define a hedge as simply a continuous line of thick shrubs or trees. A shrub is a plant with several branching woody stems and no main trunk, smaller than a tree. Okay? Hedge is a row of closely planted shrubs, bushes, anything serving as a fence or barrier. That's the type of thing that makes it easy for people who want to be creative, crafty, what have you, to suggest that there's some ambiguity in your code. And we all know if you get into the court situation, it's not preferable to have a case-by-case determination of these things. And it's not good to have any ambiguity where somebody can suggest to the court that the court needs to resolve the ambiguity, because invariably rules of construction are going to come into play, and the government's going to be on the losing side. So that's throwing a lot at you, but I know this is kind of a goofy topic. It's not a very important thing that maybe we should all be spending our time in. But yet, I just think it's the time for you to act on it and get rid of this. I pulled a couple of cases as just simple examples of how this, I understand it as logic or reason to suggest you can just rely upon common standard definitions, plain ordinary terms. Surely that won't get you in any trouble. Here's a township case where the words in question were simply ingress and egress. Sure, that ingress and egress are certainly susceptible to common ordinary meanings, right? Well, this particular case dealt with underground pipes that were going to serve as access to this property through tunnels. And the words ingress and egress were not defined by the township in its resolution, so the court generally accepted, well, one common and acceptable plain ordinary meaning would be tunnels that are underground serve as ingress and egress because they allowed you to get into and out of the property. I use that as an example to you that that's the type of thing you don't want decided on a case-by-case basis because the township came out on the losing end. Another example for you is a simple one involving the words height, area, and grade. Again, three simple terms, not unlike hedge or bush or shrub or what have you, where you would think any court would apply a standard typical definition to what height is in area. The court stressed that these phrases weren't defined in the zoning resolution, found there was an ambiguity because the proponent was coming up with different definitions than those suggested by the township. Township comes out on the losing end. With that background, I think here that the two definitions that are of importance would solve the predicament that you face under 602.10. Define a hedge as a row or line of closely spaced shrubs planted and trained in such a manner as to form a barrier, screen, or fence, or to mark the boundary of an area. And then similarly define shrub as simply a bushy, woody plant, generally with several permanent stems instead of a single trunk, thereby distinguishing it from a tree planted and trained to serve as a landscape feature. If you just adopted those two, it would solve the problem and dispense with all of the discussion raised by the zoning commission relating to defining tree. Finally, there was not much discussion that I saw during the zoning commission meeting about wall. Again, in drafting the proposed definition for wall, I wanted to not only deal with the situation that wall is used in 602.1, but also look throughout the balance of the resolution and make sure that defining wall didn't create any problems, dealing with buildings, structures, and so on. I did not find that there were any conflicts created. And I think that including this relatively simple definition of wall would be helpful as well. Again, that's a lot to throw at you on a rather unusual topic. I hope I've provided some explanation of what was intended to be dealt with in this. And if you have any other questions, by all means, I'm welcome to answer.
We hold any questions until we
Oh,
get comments from anybody in the public that's here to address.
Before we let Jim go, can I ask just one?
Sure.
Just so I'm clear, Jim. So you would insert into our language hedge, shrub, and wall and eliminate tree altogether?
Yeah, that can be done without creating any problems and accomplishing the goal of adding more clarity to 602.1.
Okay.
Simply because tree is not actually dealt with in that section. And in essence, by providing a specific definition for shrub, limiting hedge to shrubs, we are excluding trees
Okay.
at the same time.
Makes sense.
We're just trying to accomplish the same thing.
Yep.
All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, do we have anybody here in the audience tonight that is here for the sake of the public, hearing on this text change regarding hedge, shrub, wall, tree? wishes to speak either in support of or in opposition to? Hot topic here, guys. Okay. Well, if there's nothing from the audience, I will say, I mean, much to echo Jim's comments, you know, from contacting the National Arbor Society to, my wife actually works for the Davy Tree Expert Company, and I immediately said, hey, how's the Davy Tree Company or the Davy Resource Group, which is seen as a national expert on this, how do you define this? Well, honestly, the hedge and the shrub, pretty easy. The tree, based upon contract examples that they have with utility companies, it was all over the place. So unfortunately, some were very loose in their nature, others were ultra restrictive, but it was for the sake of contracting purposes. So based upon the logic that's been presented, I think the clarity will hopefully prevent anything like this ever from happening again. Just put it to rest. Do either of you have any comments?
I just appreciate the amount of time you've spent on this. Obviously, you've researched some other things as well. I spent a lot of time. I also looked at all the video, and there was really some good dialogue there. You know, I thought my mind was going to be made up before I watched that, and actually, they brought up some points that made some sense. So my big hang up on all of that, and you've already kind of touched on it, was 602.10 says fences, walls, and hedges, not fences, walls, hedges, and trees. So one of the conversations I had with Tom was that very thing. Why are we even talking about trees? If we could just stick to specifically these, we don't have to worry about a tree.
Right.
It wasn't 20 minutes later you called me back and said, hey, we already kind of touched on that, and the recommendation would be to eliminate that. So I appreciate the amount of time that you spent on that. I feel comfortable with the way we're going. I think those three definitions speak to our existing zoning resolution language. So.
I don't see the proper form. This is,
Do you have a resolution form on that?
all I see is the prior ones where it was regional planning, next to the township.
Well, what you're gonna do is, if, what I want you to bring to the table is a resolution to adopt a modification of what was presented. So you're not accepting or denying what our commission did or what regional planning did. What you're gonna do is adopt a modification of what was presented to them, which will eliminate the definition of tree, but accept the rest.
Yeah. So I'm gonna make a motion to adopt a modified version of Amendment 571-17 that essentially defines hedge as a row or line of closely placed shrubs planted and trained in such a way as to form a barrier, screen, or fence, or to mark the boundary of an area. As well, define shrub, a bushy, woody plant generally with several permanent stems instead of a single trunk, thereby distinguishing it from a tree, planted and trained to serve as a landscape feature. And lastly, wall, a side of a building or room typically forming part of a building structure, also an architectural or landscape partition ordinarily with a height and length greater than its thickness, used to divide, define, partition, screen or enclose an area, or to support another structure.
Second.
Yeah, and I'll draw you one up, but essentially, all that we're doing is the modifying by eliminating the definition of tree.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Okay, that will conclude our zoning hearing. It's 6:35 PM. We will reconvene to our regular meeting at 6:35, and we're going to pick up just on this topic under unfinished.
Good to see everybody this evening.
Thanks again. Thank you.
You want to just put those in the record?
Under update garbage trucks, David Friedman, just a point of clarification for moving forward, appreciate your patience here. The plan of action, the path moving forward at this point is, we indicated, will be a letter to their legal statutory agent, as well as enclosing the drafted legislation we have. Meanwhile, I would recommend engaging Gary, even on the HOA level still, to try to push that, because from a statutory aspect, if they still thumb their nose at us, it's still going to be difficult potentially to move it forward based upon some of the comments that were made. So does that encompass, at least what you guys had as well? Provide Mr. Friedman some direction? Yes. Any questions at this point?
No?
Okay. Thank you for
Thank you.
being patient and coming out. And
Okay.
feel free, if you want to, at any time, just to touch base with Township Hall or any of the three of us. Just saying, hey, have you guys, has the letter went out? Have we heard anything back? What's going on? We'll be more than happy to provide that update. Okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
Nothing else under unfinished business, so it's going to take us to new business, and we'll leave that with Mrs. Campbell.
Thank you. It's not that I want to sit close to Eric, it's my computer is not working, so. I do have a resolution tonight. Be hereby resolved by the Clinton Township Board of Trustees, Stark County, Ohio, to approve security installation at the Township Hall from Security USA LLC, and to authorize payment of $7,500 from Fund 01B02.
I will so move.
I'll second it.
Discussion, I think for clarification purposes, this isn't something that's just come up. We've almost, 18 months ago,
Absolutely.
had initiated discussion on securing the grounds at all of our facilities. We've taken some of the proactive measures through partnering with the Sheriff's Office on ALICE training to, we do have some exterior access control after hours. However, we had experienced another incident where recently somebody come barging straight in to our administrative offices in a very hostile, adversarial, threatening tone is what it was. And I mean, I can't, no, it wasn't, most people know. It's not on my watch. I can't in good faith sit here and weigh any other options. This proposal here integrates with our existing system. Our IT director has sat down, weighed the proposals, and given the security providers integration into the existing system. I think this is a good recommendation to move forward with. Just from an access control. Unfortunately for folks in the public, if you're not familiar, my background actually was 15 years working for Diebold, where we did security and stuff. Access control is unfortunately not one of the cheaper means, just because of the brains to the system and the hardware that goes along with it. But I'd like to think most folks in the public would agree that $7,500 is, a small investment to make for the safety and security versus somebody's life. If we're dealing with very high-strung, confrontational, dangerous individual or individuals. So, any other comments by my fellow trustees? Okay, no further discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes. now conclude new business, it'll take us to the fiscal officer's report, and I'll turn that over to Mr. Wolf.
Thank you. Fiscal Officer number 1 is a request for resolution to authorize the payment of pending warrants in the amount of $621,051.30.
I will so move.
Second.
Discussion, just to clarify, this is larger than normal, just because of the year-end with the medical transfer that we used to see, otherwise everything else is normal expense here. No further discussion, roll call please.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 2 is a request for a resolution to authorize payment of regular payroll in an amount not to exceed $250,000.
I'll move on fiscal officer number 2.
I'll second it.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 3 is a request for a resolution to authorize the payment for the following medical claims.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 4 is the financial report for October.
Financial report, I think it's just important to note, nice work too on finding ways to further expand our means, or our tools available for the investment of any funds that we have through the, what was it, commercial paper?
Commercial paper, yeah.
So to touch on that, I had to add it to concern of fiscal officer, but since Scott brought it up, you want to...
Sure. Yeah, under the Ohio Revised Code, the township's allowed to invest a portion of their investment portfolio in commercial paper. In order to do that, there was extra training and certification I had to acquire, which I've completed all of that. I'm in the process of updating the investment policy for the township. I sent you all a rough draft for that. So probably next meeting, I'll have that on the agenda with a resolution to adapt that. And then we can start putting a portion of the investments in the commercial paper, which has a higher rate of return than the Star Ohio is currently using. So based on my projections, it should increase interest about $30,000 per year.
That's awesome.
Which that's compounded amongst the, what was the prime numbers, it went from $1,000 to about $7,000 a month based on
That's a great job, Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification.
Fiscal Officer number 5 is a request for resolution to authorize the following transfers.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 6 is a request for resolution to authorize payment to members of the Plain Township Boards of Zoning Appeals and Zoning Commission for the period of July 1, 2017 through December 31, 2017 at the rate of $50 per meeting for a total of $1,050.
I'll move on fiscal officer number 6.
I'll second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Fiscal Officer number 7 is a request for resolution to authorize the Plain Township Fiscal Officer to request an additional amended certificate of estimated resources from the Stark County Auditor for $303,712.51, and upon certification by the Stark County Auditor to appropriate these funds as follows.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
And Fiscal Officer number 8 is the notice for annual liquor license permit renewals, and this is the opportunity for the board to object if they request. There were no concerns I'm aware of from the Sheriff's Department.
Correct.
That's important. Okay. There's no need to sit on that then.
I don't think so.
Okay,
Move on.
and that concludes the Fiscal Officer report.
Thank you, Tom. Our Administrator, Ms. Key.
Thank you. I item number 1 is a resolution to approve and authorize payment to Warsaw Brothers Landscaping for the October 2017 composting in the amount of $2,250 from Fund 01A26L.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Item number 2 is a resolution by the Plain Township Board of Trustees to approve work done by the fence line at Dunn Park to keep soccer balls off the road by Rice's Nursery and to authorize payment of $2,712.25 to be paid from Fund 01B02.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion,
Yes, at the Bothwell Cup tournament, there were areas, there have been areas of the fence line that are down. One was from a person driving through it, another wear and tear. And as I was walking around the tournament, saw the open line, next thing you know, soccer ball right onto the road. And there are areas where, regardless of how, if we had to rework the fields, there's always going to be goal there. So the thought is, and from being at lots of soccer tournaments and places, usually when you abut a road, it's bushes because they'll stop the ball. So just in those areas that are down to install bushes, it's a safety hazard.
now is a bush fall as a
I was gonna
section
say,
of a
is that
hedge
shrub
or
or
shrub?
a hedge? I was just gonna say, what's that one?
Yeah, or a wall.
Synonymous, so it's bush.
That's
Then you read my
Bush.
mind.
I'm sorry, I couldn't pass that up.
you know,
Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
and that's the end of the administrator report.
Thank you. Fire Department, Chief Schellenberger.
Item number 1 is a resolution by the Plain Township Board of Trustees, Stark County, Ohio, to authorize the reimbursement to Rod Morton in the amount of $400, Howard Hirschberger in the amount of $230.04, Ben Hirschberger in the amount of $249.24 for healthcare membership reimbursement under provision 37 of the collective bargaining agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Item number 2 is a resolution by the Plain Township Board of Trustees to authorize the purchase and payment to PSI to conduct geotechnical subsurface inspection for the sanitary sewer extension located at 7858 Market North, our Station 4, in the amount not to exceed $4,000 to be taken from 21A02K.
I'll-
Attached quote.
I'll move on FD2.
Second in discussion. Important to clarify, again, this is another one of those projects your predecessor had actually initiated just due to the age and the challenges with the septic system at Station 4 on North Market, and we've been waiting to see what was going on with some of the property up along that area. This is the initial step to even see what can be done from, whether it be a sewer or tying into the public sanitary based upon the soil composition that gets sent out for analysis.
Correct, yeah, we have to do the boring samples to be able to, get the bid prices for the sewer extension, to make sure what's underneath there, if it would increase cost, et cetera. So once we get that done, we'll be able to move forward with a sewer plan to hook into the county main here.
Discussion homework already. This may not just be us, we may really partner with a number of other entities, whether it's organizations or individuals, which may help defray some of the investment.
Correct, we have a commercial development going next to us at the fire station, that is seeked, wanting to go on to county sewer versus, septic. There's a few residential homes that may be able to attach in, and so we we hope, a little bit of a community improvement also to the, to the area too, so there won't be many septics, ours is failing at that station, so we need to either replace or expand the sewer.
As you say, from the annual meetings with the Stark County Health Department, Stark County's got, I think, the highest concentration of septic systems in the state of Ohio. And there's almost a directly proportionate number of failing systems. And the challenges, at least with the new systems, they're all the aeration, whether it's commercial or residential, that even those with maintenance plans that are required on them at the county level, that gets very expensive. So some of the upfront investment costs, we may see, there may be a difference, but once you figure in the accrual of year-over-year service maintenance cost and the reliability, it could be.
It's kind of like water line build out. You know, you're gonna pay the upfront cost, but as other people come on somewhere within that line, they defray the overall cost of that, so there is a cost sharing. And they're gonna put laterals in, right?
Yes.
So along the way, recognizing that people are probably eventually futuristically going to attach to that, they'll put laterals in those spots, so it'll be easy to attach to them. It's not
Joe, where's Ivy? How close is it to that?
That's true.
Just south side, it's right
That's true.
If you remember, Ivy needed sewer, but at the time, there was nowhere close, or they were the only allotment that wanted it. We wonder if they would tie into this now.
It's possible.
But
We'll be teeing right there by the gas station, so if we're low enough,
Elevations might be a problem.
Yeah, that's, yeah. You have to be, you know, because you
For gravity fed.
can't make it go uphill, it's gravity, so.
they could do a force main or something, but, you
Yeah.
know, if there is a potential for ivy, and then maybe the allotment behind
for
us,
a long time.
and the new development, and some homeowners on market, probably about the top of that hill, and it kind of fades over the hill there on Market North. So-
Can we contact someone from Ivy just in case it does work?
The plan we have is to put a lateral there, so now, eventually they could extend off of it.
Probably catch a couple houses right there.
Yeah, once it gets a little lower.
Ivy kind of goes, the elevations go downhill.
Goes down, and then it starts to climb back.
So we're hoping it'll be a community improvement too, at the same time solving our immediate problem.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
And item number 3 is a resolution by Plain Township Board of Trustees, Stark County, Ohio, to authorize the purchase of payment for Scott Air Pack bench testing and certification to Warren Fire Equipment not to exceed $3,000 from Fund 10A10.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
And that concludes fire department. Thank you.
Let's get take us to the road department. Mr. Axino.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, item number 1 is a resolution of the Board of Trustees to authorize Blast Tech to perform blasting, coating, and of a tanker truck frame, axles, and frame components not to exceed $2,650.
I will so
I'll
move.
second.
Discussion. This is tied to the old tanker truck that we're transitioning from road to.
Chief Schellenberger was kindly gave to us, we took off the old tank, now we're gonna get the frame all ready, then we're gonna set it up for a grind truck for winter time.
Thus, the coating and all of that, obviously,
It's,
inhibit
it needs
rust.
some work.
Yeah.
Further discussion, roll call, please.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Item number 2 is a resolution to hire Ben Hirschberger as a part-time seasonal employee on an on-call as-needed basis effective 11/15/17 and end employment on 4/30/17 at a rate of $20 an hour with no benefits.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Oh,
Joe, I think that for public clarification purposes, really, but, you know, we went down was it a body or 2
We're
road
down
to where we're looking to use
one
like
right
a
now.
part-time seasonal for plowing.
Trustee Lino come to me with this a few years ago, and we looked at it, and we were trying to find guys that actually knew the township, knew our equipment, and then recently the whole board asked me to look for some guys in case of emergency. We never know, we get that big storm, or guys are sick or something, we have somebody to fall back on. So both both these resolutions tonight will cover 2 ex-retired employees who know the township and the equipment. And we had done another one a few weeks ago, so we'll have 3 guys on call that we can call in as needed for this winter.
And obviously the union was okay with that as well.
Yes, they didn't
Yeah.
have a problem with it.
Sure. Yep.
Great move. No further discussion, roll call please.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
And item number 3 is a resolution to hire Randy Target as a part-time seasonal employee on an on-call as needed basis, effective 11/15/17 through 4/30/18, it should say, at a rate of $20 an hour with no benefit.
I'll move on, road 3.
I'll second it.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. We're going to take it to zoning, Mr. Farrar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Item number 1 is a resolution to approve nuisance abatements for items A and B.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
And item number 2 is a resolution to approve abatement payments for item A.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
And that will conclude zoning.
Thank you. Takes the Parks Department, Mr. Steinberg.
Thank you. The one earlier item tonight is to authorize payment by resolution to Miller and Company for Porta-John services for what should read the Bothwell Cup Soccer Tournament in the amount of $25.50.25 from Fund 14808A for the services.
I'll move on, Parks 1.
Second, discussion, roll call.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes. Okay. That concludes Parks, nothing on the law director. Communications we already hit on. I know we have, I'm sorry.
No,
Or was
Yeah.
it?
well, really it just
Or-
parrots what
Yes.
Kevin
Communication,
Springer
so-
talked about, so.
So for the sake of it, I'll just read it. It's from Sheriff Meyer to Alan Harold, who's the HOA president over there. Dear Alan, thank you for the opportunity to meet with the Avondale Homeowners Association. It was clear that some of your residents had concerns about traffic enforcement. I wanted to let you know that my office completed an extra traffic enforcement project above and beyond our normal patrols in the neighborhood based on HOA concerns. The traffic enforcement effort was a combined effort with Plain Township. The initiative began September 26th and ended October 29th. Our deputies completed 122 traffic stops in the neighborhood and issued 68 traffic citations. There was one impaired driver removed from the roadway. While this was an effort to encourage safer driving through the neighborhood, we realized that motorists may soon begin pushing the limits again. We will continue to patrol the neighborhood, but we encourage your residents to contact my office by calling dispatch. However, if there is an emergency, call 911. A dispatcher will gather some basic info and dispatch the first available deputy to the area of concern. If I may be of further assistance, please do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you for assisting my office in contributing to a safer Stark County. Always at your service, Sheriff George Meyer. Okay. Does bring us a portion of the meeting. Public speaks, if anybody has anything that, Mrs. Garber, if you would just state your name and address for the record, please.
Suzanne Garber, 5915 Linder Circle, Northeast. I have a comment and 2 questions. One with the garbage trucks. I really appreciate them coming at 4 in the morning in the summer, because then by the time I walk my dog early before the heat hits, the garbage is already gone. So one positive for
Thank you.
Can I look up home rule on the Plain Township website to further understand it?
We'll be happy to show you if it's, because our website's still a little, if you go to the zoning tab, it should be on the left-hand side.
Actually, home rule won't be there. Home rule will be under, under trustees, I believe. There's a drop-down that says home rule.
Okay, thank you. And then I have a question. I see business as usual, and I'm sure there's long-term and short-term plans or projects. Can any of you speak to what might be coming up for Plain Township in the next year or the next 5 years?
I
What-
mean, are
Like,
you looking
well,
at specific
well,
areas in mind, or,
Well,
are you talking residential, commercial, or both?
all of it, but our roads in Sherwood Village, particularly one was missed the last time that the whole area was paved, and that would be, and it's been patched a couple times, but it's a mess, and that would be Saxon.
I can try to speak, I'll speak high level to this, and
Okay.
feel free to drill me down. On roads, because you guys, being the residents, had passed a renewal and an increase, actually, whether it wants to be argued it was a tax increase or not, we used to only be able to pave maybe 6.5 to 8 miles of road, and within the last 2 years, because of the increase in levy dollars, we've actually 17.6 miles this year and 17.2 miles this year. And to help put that into perspective, we got about 175 miles of roadway. So that's about 10% a year. So it essentially puts us on about a 10-year replacement cycle. Prior to that, with 8 miles, we were pushing every bit of somewhere between 15 to 20-year replacement cycle. What happens through Joe's office down there, and Joe, you can tell me to cut at any point, but essentially we have a master spreadsheet in Excel that tracks all of the roads, when they were last paved,
Condition ratings.
Yeah, condition ratings and so forth. So what happens is, at the beginning of every year, the road department, through Joe, Paul, and Sean Moriarty, they're going out there inspecting the roads, going, okay, hey, here's our next high priority roads, but, based upon, what's happened since last year's review, have there been any changes that may catapult something lower down on the list up, because, our goal is to get to it and resurface it before it becomes a foundational issue, and then you're doing a full depth reclamation, which becomes a very expensive
Well, on Middle Branch and Easton, that is the best it has ever been done, because those areas where there's pipes have sunk, and the concrete around there is wonderful.
And to just build off of that, Easton and Middle Branch are county maintained roads. Market is a state road.
Yeah.
We've got a section at Apple Grove from Market to the North Canton border that the county takes care of, or do we pay?
The county takes care of Apple Grove all the way from North Canton to
Middle Branch.
Actually goes to Middle Branch, I guess, is in.
Oh, yeah, or
the
to,
bridge.
yeah.
That's true.
So the part of Middle Branch that's sinking into the creek by the post office up there,
That's Stark
somebody
County,
should let the
that's
county
Stark
know.
County engineers, they're aware.
Actually, in the county, and to the county's credit, they're highly responsive. I actually had an issue earlier this year, I won't digress too far, but down off of Bentler, I had a resident, it started out as a yard erosion issue. And, well, that's not a county ditch, we were originally told. Well, as I keep looking at the situation, I'm like, something's gotta be able to be done here. And we get to look at how this creek, comes through the farmer's field, through the box bridge, and then, outside the yard erosion, it's starting to wrap around, parallel with the road. Well, I'm out mountain biking one day, just on the roads, and next thing you know, I'm like, man, there's really a dip that's visible as you're driving. Well, here, that section of Bentler between Easton and Columbus, because of an agreement with Nimishillen Township, they typically take care of. Because if you were to look at that roadway, physically half the road's Plain Township, half the road would be Nimishillen Township. But, years, well before most of us were probably here, imagine if a Plain Township truck just, sorry, John. A Plain Township truck just plows one lane and the other lane's still covered. You're going, what the heck's going on here? So we had an arrangement with Nivishil into where they take care of the section of Bentler between Easton and Columbus, and then we take care of the section from Easton over to Warner Church.
Diamond, actually.
Or Diamond. So, back to this issue, seeing the road starting to be undercut because the guardrail, the metal post that it was affixed to, were actually just starting to hang. Well, now, I got with the resident, helped him fill out the off-road drainage complaint form, and because we collaborated with the county, we collaborated with Nivishil and Township, put a little money in, we got it fast-tracked. So, I mean, they jump on serious issues. Honestly, it comes down to financial resources, prioritizing, ultimately. So they are a good partner, and I can give you another example real quick, just with all the build-out that's happened up in the Whipple-Everhart area with the venue. It's going to cause some headaches just from a traffic congestion up there, but there's going to be some retiming of traffic signals. There's going to be widening and repaving of that roadway through there to help ease future traffic. And as part of that county project, they come to us and say, hey, we're going to be doing paving a number of miles down Whipple. Will the township, chip in, what was it? It was $25,000. And we're getting significantly greater value than that $20,000 to $25,000 buy-in in repaving some of the entryways into our side streets and so forth. So from an infrastructure, we continue to go after CDBG funds. Flooding's the township issue. And actually, what's the one we were talking about tail end of last week, this week, where we've got a plan where 55th and Linford? 45th.
Oh, yeah.
45th and Linford. We've applied for grants, and a lot of that comes down to scoring, financial. We think we found another way around it where, partnering with the county, they're going to be able to help get us through some of the hard parts, and we're going to be able to pick off, if it was done all at once, about a $1.2 million project over the next couple of years because of partnering with the county and off-road drainage. We're going to be able to help alleviate some of those issues, because that's an area where when it's flooded, it's a very bad area. So you've got that on the infrastructure side of things. From the safety service side of things, we've been fully ramped up from our levy commitments on the bodies per shift. Easy. Yeah, that was passing 14. So from an outside of personnel, we'll be dealing with filling, retirements come up, but Chuck's been working through some strategic stuff on, equipment, primarily right down here by Old Station 4, where the yard waste drop-off is. We've got our new training facility that's going to be going in there. That's something where we set up a capital account, work to accrue funds and so forth. The old facility was in pretty bad shape to where it couldn't be restored from a masonry perspective. Within the parks, we continue almost every other year. We're getting ODNR nature work grant money, whether it's for I'm trying to think, the playground, the new playground equipment over at Alpines, and the flush facility at Veterans to, we have.
Plus the grant at the slush pad, which wasn't ODNR, but was just.
Yeah, so, we had a township collaborative relationship with a business owner that said, hey, I would like to come, propose putting in a splash pad that makes the parks a little more attractive yet for children and families, and through our capital improvement of sites fund, we took a $60,000 project where the business owner donated $20,000 there, and then the township funded the rest. We're able to continue making some of those investments, and we'll continue to write grants for that because our parks are run off of programming revenue. We don't have a levy, so it's really the users that are coming in that are paying for it, with a small portion that is historically has come out of the general fund. So,
is there anything being done with the schools? with me. A long time ago, it was thought that maybe there could be a swimming pool, a community pool in the high school.
That's the school that, I can tell you, some of that conversation centered around a partnership with the YMCA, looking at maybe coming in and either building a facility or managing part of a facility, because I sit on the North Canton YMCA board, and Brent May did a stellar job at trying to pull a number of resources together, pull that off, but financially still couldn't get it to go. And that would have been out by that area where the tennis courts are.
Did you know the tennis courts are always locked? And I can understand why, but it certainly isn't community.
I mean, outside, the schools, I can't speak to that.
We have tennis courts at Alpine.
But our tennis courts
They
down
just-
there.
They're not as good.
They were just resurfaced.
They were just resurfaced tail end of last year.
Okay.
So you have that.
They're actually newer than those.
To, on the zoning, planning, development side of things, continue to work with some developers. I mean, this is probably boring, but we created a new zoning classification code last year. R7, it's planned mixed unit development, because it's part of our comprehensive mini master plan. One of the things has to do with infill in the area, and when the folks were approaching us even about Oakwood, they were looking at it as a mixed unit potential. Now, they ultimately didn't pursue it, but when we went to have that language established, we also had to look at it not just here, but where out. If this was to be pursued and applied in the township, what type of effects would it have? So, on the zoning, planning, and development side of things, with what we've seen commercially over the last 18 to 24 months, we expect still some of that to be happening. You're going to see a lot more with residential build out still. Wicker Creek has an extension that's going on right now. You've got some additional phases at Lexington Farms, off of Mount Pleasant, the backside of Bobolink, Pinecrest Meadows, Skip Ray, and then Edgewood will likely be moving forward in 18. The only reason nothing was done during 17, it's a combination of the road widening of Market 43 and the developer not wanting to further make that an issue, but then as well, they also on their back end, that's outside of any of our control, they were looking for they were in search of a certain builder or builders that would buy a certain number of parcels to develop, because once they had that with how financing works on the back end, once they had one or two, folks that would buy a certain amount of lots, that would allow them to secure the financing to pull in the infrastructure, i.e. to run, roads, the sanitary. So the south edge of Edgewood that butts up against Stonehenge, first phase will have some single-family homes, and then there's a portion out by, it'd be to the north of the church, where they had some of the standalone villa homes for senior, that you'll have that going on there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else residentially big that's.
They just turned in the sewer and the paving plans to the roads for Edgewood. So they're beginning.
Yeah. So, the reality is, we're at a 78% residential, 22% commercial. In a perfect world, it'd be about 70-30. The reality is nobody's going to reverse those trends and get us back to 70-30, because that means you're going to have to go through and you're going to have to start leveling residential allotments where existing folks live in order to make room for business. And I don't know where that would happen. So unfortunately, the reason that's important is that 20 to 22% that is commercial, we got to fight for it to protect. There's a number of ways that can be done, but the reason being is when you take a look at the commercial tax-based dollars, when you look at residential versus commercial, for every dollar that's collected in taxes in a residential area, typical rule of thumb is anywhere from $1.30 to $1.40 in services is expended. So it actually has a cost to it, whereas when you take a look at each dollar that comes in on the commercial side, it costs about 60 cents to deliver services into that area. So you're netting out to a positive, you know, on the revenue side, which helps offset that residential side of things. So, does that help?
Thank you, yes, yes, very much.
I know sometimes I just, yeah.
Sir, ma'am, I misspoke on that location. If you go across the green banner about midway across, it says our township. If you click on that, then the banner drops down for
Thank you.
home rule.
And yeah, the second item down on it says home rule.
Okay, thank you.
And then on the left-hand side, you'll see all the different sections. It's informative. I call it sleeper documentation, so if you're having a hard night's sleep, you may want to fire it up. You good, Stu?
Yes, thank you.
Is there anybody else that wishes to address the board? That'll conclude public speaks. I'll take some concerns of trustees. Anything from either of my fellow trustees?
Thank you.
Okay, concerns of the fiscal officer?
Toy soldier. You wanted to mention the toy soldier?
No, that's something between you and me.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. Oh, you know what, but I will. Is the tree still out there?
Yes.
Just for the sake of public, we've still got the Toy Soldier Christmas tree. It's a partnership between the township and the Stark County Veterans Service Commission. We've got tags out there on the tree, trying to help 140 families. So if anybody's interested in taking tags, just ask that you get some back here to Township Hall by December 8th, because we're having an event on December 16th where they're going to be handing that stuff out over to the Veterans Service Commission.
And one of the questions, they do want those wrapped with that tag attached.
So takes to the approval of the minutes for October 24th, 2017, and I will so move.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes. We do have a need for executive session, so be it hereby resolved by the Plain Township Board of Trustees, Stark County, Ohio, to adjourn to executive session at 7:18 p.m. from this regular meeting is authorized under Ohio Revised Code 121G for the purpose and consideration of 1A, appointment of a public employee or official, 1B, employment of a public employee or official, 1F, compensation of a public employee or official.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Lino?
Yes.
Mr. Sabo?
Yes.
Mr. Hawes?
Yes.